Hey, welcome to Our Tech Chronicles, and it's episode 34 this time. And I have the pleasure of joining Asanka and Roshan here, who are regulars on the episode. And we have the absolute pleasure of having JP or Patrick over from Atlanta, who's joining us. And just to give a little bit of background about JP, he's currently a board member at System Physics and been running multi-million-dollar large data enterprises over the last 10 to 15 years. Been part of Axicom, Bridgewine, and then several years at Big Cloud Analytics. So I would on this hand it over to JP to give a more detailed introduction of himself. So over to you, JP.
Thank you, Ahanta. You're embarrassing me. If you look at the longer arc, Ahanta, it's been more than 15 years. There's quite a bit of gray in this beard these days. I didn't always have the beard. This is a COVID fixture, and it just keeps getting longer and longer. So I'm a data guy that's involved into a data and analytics guy that's evolved into a data analytics and AI guy, over the last 7 or 8 years. But the common arc or common theme there is across regulated industries, and that spans insurance, financial services, credit card, healthcare, clinical trials, clinical research, and it's a mix of different size companies, right? So de novo startups, stage 0 to 1, CEO of venture capital, private equity backed mid stage growth companies. And then I did a stint running a global business unit for a publicly traded NASDAQ company, Axiom. At that time, we were the world's largest consumer data company and started out with a remit to build a strategy practice on top of that data business, where the business had an unbelievable data asset on US and Western European consumers, and statisticians. So I appreciate y'all having me on. It's an honor to talk with you and spend some time today.
Thank you for joining us, JP. It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, what an impressive resume. Look forward to the conversation today.
So our topic today, like Ehanta mentioned, is does AI enable a new way of creating enterprise value? Maybe to start off, let's define what is enterprise value, right?
Yeah.
And we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the context, right? So in an established company setting, it's probably a way to improve EBITDA, because it's all about bottom line once you're up and running and of a certain size. In early stage companies, it's more about trajectory and revenue growth. And so I think the setting matters quite a bit. And the application of AI matters differently for these different types of companies, of whether it is a revenue generating exercise or an efficiency play. But enterprise value, as I think about it, is, you could think about it in market cap terms in public companies. You could think about it in revenue multiples or EBITDA multiples for private companies. But in essence, if you were to transact the company, what's somebody willing to pay you for it? And are you doing something that's improving that? Would be a very simplistic view of it, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree. Just thinking out aloud, maybe what comes to mind is also from an enterprise company perspective, differentiation of what you offer in the market versus anyone else, right? That market differentiation. And maybe another one could be resilience to change, to all these factors that the company is subject to. So that, like you said, many factors, right? And so that makes this topic very, very interesting.
I like that distinction, because on the differentiation topic, when you said that, the thought that came to mind was, I've been involved in a number of exercises over the years where we were, as a company, we're trying to shift our market basket of comparables, meaning we didn't want to be compared to our traditional competitors anymore. We wanted to be compared to this segment over here. And to do that, we had to do something that got people to recognize us as a different type of company. And so, yeah, I think differentiation kind of plays in that enterprise value and market basket of comparables for sure.
I have another kind of maybe controversial question I want to ask. Maybe I ask that in every episode now. So with AI, the large language model is really owned by, a big company like, OpenAI or Claude. And they really know how the model is trained. It's not something that they're going to expose to the users or even to the enterprises. So when you're talking about creating organization value, talking about differentiation, are we really at risk? Because now you have these large language models, like who's really capable of doing it. Like, what value can a company really add? Because anybody can replace an existing company, legacy company, with a new company, because you have the capability within this AI AI. I'm not talking about the AI models that exist today, but we should think about the evolution of AI. At some point, there's going to be AGI. That could mean like a complete change or makeover in how the industry is going to perform.
It's a great question, and it reminds me of a joke. So I'll start with a joke, and it's a very nerdy joke, so not everybody might find it funny. But there's this startup founder, and they're in pitching a VC with this idea of how they're going to use AI to do X, Y, and Z. And the partner at the VC firm turns to the startup founder and says, you're just a wrapper around an LLM. And the startup founder sits there for a minute, and he looks back at the VC partner, and he says, well, you're just a wrapper around an LP. And so it is a good question, and it kind of gets to the heart of the matter, I think, is that, and I think it kind of plays into this thesis that I have that it's emerging. And again, I'm open to debate on this because it's early days in me thinking about this, and my thoughts are continually evolving. But the barrier to entry to IP creation is going to zero, whether that is and you think about it in terms of kids now starting their college journey, whether it be computer science or mathematics or engineering, the commoditization of knowledge and reasoning is rapidly going to zero. And so I think it's a bigger argument than just enterprise value. And I've heard some VCs in recent months espouse the point of view that sales and marketing are becoming the only things that really matter, because IP creation is, the barriers to entry are going away. You don't have to have a lot of capital and a lot of time. To your point, though, about LLMs, and I think this is an important kind of distinction, is there's a whole spectrum of AI out there, right? From everything from computer vision to machine learning and statistical analysis to the LLMs, and each one is a little bit better at different things or different use cases. There's not really a one size fit all, because the LLMs are typically not really good at math yet, and they're okay at OCR and they're okay at computer vision. One of the things that we're finding in real world applications is that while the base LLM can be the same, it could all underneath the hood be GPT-5 or Grok 4 or things like that. The harness and the framework that you put around it to give it context, to give it memory, to maintain state are areas where I think you can innovate. And in some cases, maybe you're innovating ahead of the roadmap that these companies are headed down, which makes you a good acquisition target, for them potentially. But your point is spot on, I think. Where I'm at least trying to lie to myself in this area is that in the background there's a light that's on, and that light's powered by electricity, and somewhere out here through the forest in the TVA there is a hydroelectric plant that's generating that electricity. At one point in time, that was a competitive differentiator, and it was unique and it was novel. And now it's just part of the grid. It's just there. It's part of the fabric in which we build. And I think cloud services, cloud computing, kind of same thing. And I'm old enough and I have enough gray in my beard now that we built data centers at one time and we co-located our own stuff. And we put our own servers, and I've spent nights with pizza boxes plugging in Ethernet cords. I don't do that anymore, but at one time that was our differentiation. And so I give you those examples to say that we are at the front end of a new grid that is coming online, and it's a reasoning grid. And in some ways, I think that the way the power's up there, the way that I get my email, those are all innovative, novel technologies at one time that we all just take for granted at this point, and we innovate on top of. And so I'm hopeful that the same thing emerges with AI.
Yeah, maybe with that, we can switch to kind of the core of the topic. If I'm an enterprise or medium or large enterprise, everybody wants their hands on AI, and there are so many different AI, tools and technologies out there beside the big players. How should a company start thinking about it? Like, if you are like consulting one of these companies, like how would you put a framework around it?
Some of our more successful journeys have been where we have started with the company really almost like a McKinsey or a Bain to really kind of talk to them about business strategy and what type of company do they want to become. Because I think that informs a lot of what type of data do we need to organize, what type of semantic layer do we need to put on top of it, what refresh rates do we need, and then what use cases should be in play. Because I think if we start just at the data level, or if we start just at the technology level, my new favorite word from that book we were talking about is local optima, right? We're optimizing within the context of what they are today, rather than really kind of stepping back and saying, where do we want to take this business? What are the assets that we have, whether it be reputation, market position, differentiation, balance sheet? What does that enable us to become? And what is the vision of the leadership team to where this business wants to go? And then work backwards from that then to say, okay, well, then this is the data we need to organize in the data lake. This is the way we need to exchange data with partners. This is the team we've got to build. And then that begins to identify the AI use cases, I think, that are transformative as opposed to revolutionary, as opposed to evolutionary. Because there's a lot of evolutionary use cases for AI that have to do with improved customer service and chatbot and entering invoices into accounting systems and those types of things. And I'm even seeing some interesting uses of AI for QA, for call center interactions and things like that. But I think those are all evolutionary. And this is a time actually to take a step back and think about some revolutionary use cases too, to become a different type of company. Back to our conversation on enterprise value about shifting your market basket of comparables. There's a big switch right there, right? If I'm thinking about local optima and I'm thinking about an efficiency play, I'm getting better EBITDA, I'm improving enterprise value, but I'm staying the same type of company. So my multiples stay the same. If I really want, and I think all those things probably should be done, because they can fuel your journey to other things. But there is an opportunity here to say, I want to become something completely different that's valued multiples of what I'm currently valued in my category today. And to do that, I think it takes a little bit different type of thinking.
Nihant, any thoughts?
So I think considering the journey that we're looking forward to in the next few months, how do we really? I think JP, thoughts on how do we really take some of the stuff that you have done around in the US, and how do we really imply it into the, you know Dubai based or the Eastern markets, and what do you think the similarities and the lines that potentially can be drawn?
Yep. So I think the typical answer, the obvious answer there is that there are repeatable patterns that are developed in industry leaders or in leading markets around the world that then become transferable to other industries or other markets. And the example of this is, a while back did work with really big financial institutions and banks, and a lot of it was focused on credit card marketing and how do we use data to do these response and prediction models of who's likely to apply for a credit card, and how do we go find more customers that look just like these customers and those types of things. And where we were focused at that time is if we could squeeze out another 25 basis points of response, it was hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for these enterprises. And the number of PhDs and statisticians and data engineers that were applied to those problems, really, really big teams doing really, really hard things to try to move something 25 basis points, and it had really, really big outcomes. That's 15, almost 20 years ago now. And there are mid-market companies that are just now scratching the surface where there's the opportunity to make 20, 30% improvements. It maybe not have $1 billion worth of return, but it might have $30 million worth of return. So I give that example just happening within the US, transferable knowledge from a market like credit card or financial services to mid-market companies. I think the same is true from established markets to emerging markets, is you have the ability to transfer kind of known playbooks from established markets, US, Western Europe, Australia, and apply that same type of thinking to more emerging markets where they're looking to quickly leapfrog and catch up. So I think that's one way of thinking about it, Ahantha. I think that as we do services engagements, you start to see patterns in a sector that, hey, this is a common set of problems. And this is probably the emerging of an idea that could become a SaaS product that could be repeatable, that multiple people are going to need, and it should be configurable as opposed to a customization. And historically, you've had services companies and systems integrators that go solve problems on behalf of the customer. And it's intellectual property that's owned by the customer and it's work for hire. And those types of firms, back to the enterprise value topic, man multiples that are anywhere from 1 to 1.5 to 2 times their revenue. And then you've got on the other side of the spectrum, you've got founders or technology companies that have bet the farm on, I'm going to build this. And I believe that millions and millions of people are going to buy this. And I'm going to go raise $10 million or $20 million in venture capital. What's the latest statistics on venture-backed startups? How many out of 100 are able to make that stick? Less than 10, right? And a few become unicorns. Maybe one returns the portfolio for the venture fund, but the majority basically return capital. It's really, really hard to do. Really, really smart people work really, really hard, and it's probably one of the hardest problems to solve. I'm wondering if AI and the ability to get to code quick and the ability to get to POC quick, working POCs, offer a new model that sits somewhere between those two. It's not a pure play product company. We're not betting the farm. It's not a pure services company where all we do is service this particular customer's need, but it is a services company that is finding those repeatable patterns. And then the best phrase that I have for it is this notion of an AI innovation studio is kind of the way that it's working in my mind right now, where it's like a lab. And I'm trying to incubate these concepts that I think are repeatable into these little micro businesses, knowing that if I'm going to find 5 or I'm going to find 10 of them, and one of the children, so to speak, or 2 of the children have a chance to grow up and become something different and big. But it's a much less risky strategy than saying, I'm going to go build this.
JP, I like that a lot, right? And I like how you brought it all back to the innovation studio idea. So just to recap, right? A few things you mentioned. So AI unlocks knowledge or intelligence as a commodity now. Like you said the barrier to that is now nearing zero. Second thing you said as a big differentiator now by using AI is speed or velocity. So rapid prototyping, time to market, decision making. You have this ready to use assistant at your fingertips to be able to move fast, right? You also mentioned, your data network is now expanded, the way you share data, the way you integrate with other companies. So where I'm struggling is some examples of these new types of companies. If you can give us that might, start have a few products that might grow up, like you said, into something big. Could you give us some examples, perhaps, so that we can, paint a picture in our heads?
It's pretty clear to me that companies in regulated industries, the use of AI has to obviously be very deliberate because you have everything from GLB to SOC 2 compliance to HIPAA to GDPR. And so there are a lot of rules around the use of data. So a lot of structure and a lot of framework have to be put around these things. And I originally thought that maybe this was going to go down the world of Olama, and it was going to be behind the firewall models in the cloud and those types of things. And I'm seeing enough models now to suggest that that's probably not the case. It's probably still going to use some of the frontier models. And so the way that you mask and tokenize things that you're passing to them and summarize it's requiring a lot of thought. I think it's also pretty clear that these companies in regulated industries still have people and still run on people. And so they have to think about things like their in the manufacturing world, it'd be, everything from material safety data sheets to standard operating procedures. Just call it, written instructions that they have for their employees to perform certain tasks that keep them in compliance with certain sets of rules. And it's pretty ubiquitous, from a financial services company to the way the pharma company does a clinical trial to the way that a manufacturing company deals with material safety or chemicals or whatever the case is. But it's a complex problem because a lot of the times that these contain trade secrets or things that are specific to their enterprise. So they're still confidential documents. And so I think everybody probably listening to the podcast is going to be familiar or generally familiar with things like RAG-based systems, so retrieval augmented generation, and embedding those into a vector database and chunking those documents up. I think in regulated industries, it takes an extra layer or 2 of work. to do that. And so from audit trails to end-to-end encryption on motion and at rest, to way that you are chunking the documents and that you're tokenizing the documents before you pass it to the LLM, and then all the work that needs to be done to maintain state and context so that if I ask a follow-up question, it hasn't forgotten where I was at in my conversation. Because a lot of times that these are newly tenured employees that are just joining the enterprise. They don't have 20 years worth of experience and they're a lot of times they're customer facing in these front line. And so I think that is a repeatable pattern that is coming from an understanding of these businesses working in more of a management consulting services capacity that has the potential to turn into something that could grow up. It could become a SaaS offering that has the potential to grow up. And so we're working on one of those that we call Vivian right now. Vivian is, on one side, it's your digital librarian. It's somebody you trust. You're going to give all your secrets to, and when you need to know an answer, you ask Vivian, right? And so our concept for that is Trust Vivian. It's trustvivian.com, and in its early days, but we think that is something that's an emerging pattern that has the potential to grow into something bigger. At its worst, it is a consistent need that needs to be configured for companies in these industries as a services engagement. More likely, though, I think it evolves into a configurable product. So that's one example. Another example is more on incident data. So we're working on another project that is dealing with a certain type of incident data that's very interesting to a particular industry, and to be able to look at a particular city and say there's a 83 times likelihood that this type of thing is going to happen at this spot at this time. And so it gets into being able to forecast future events based on historical trends. And there's enough data available now, 42 or 43 countries, that it feels to me like this is something that's repeatable in other markets. And so it is taking data streams from social media and from other types of systems, putting them into a packaged and repeatable way where AI is helping you find the signal, and then making it a platform that people can log into and have certain actions that happen on their behalf when certain conditions are met. There's two examples. I think there's also a lot of work. The other space that I'm more reluctant to talk about, but I'm also more excited about, is that every person on this call learns a little bit differently, speaks a little bit differently, consumes information a little bit differently. And the world that we're in right now is not mass customization. Like, we hand data to everybody in a similar way. And with a few questions I could ask each of you, we start to understand a little bit more that you like information this way, and you like information this way, and you would prefer a summary set of bullets, and you want, much more detailed information. You're all looking at the same set of information, but how we present it to you really, really matters in how you process that information. It reduces the cognitive load, gets you to faster, more accurate decisions, gets you all singing from the same sheet of music. AI enables us to get to that much, much quicker. And it is something that is greatly missing within companies today, because not everybody likes charts and graphs and numbers, as much as it breaks my heart. But there are some really, really smart people in enterprises that, just because they don't like charts and graphs and numbers, don't mean that they're not really, really smart and really, really creative. And if we can give them information in new ways that meets the way that they like to receive it, boy, can we level up in our enterprise.
JP, you just said something that I read an article very recently that resonates with me, right? It's about the traditional way of selling or marketing stuff is you break down your market into like cohorts of groups, and you have a different plan for different cohorts. And there was this recent article about leveraging AI and all the data that is there, where the cohort is becoming small and small, and sometimes the cohort is just me, right? And they're able to target me based on exactly what you said, the way I like to consume information, what drives me, what are my interests. And so they're able to target a particular way of marketing a particular product to me. So the likelihood of me, of myself being interested in it and maybe clicking on it or learning more or even purchasing it is much higher than being a more generic cohort thing. So it's kind of similar, I think, right?
It is very, very similar. And I'll tell a dirty little secret. So I spent a portion of my career trying to get people hooked on credit cards and smoke cigarettes, right? So we all probably have some story like that where we were using technology for things, and at some point you look back and you're like, is this really what I'm meant to do and be? But there's a lot of investment that goes into understanding customer segments, customer segmentation, and there is, from I treat everybody the same to I have, there was one time where we had 72 segments in the U.S. market. That's now kind of expanded to just under 200 segments in the U.S. market. These where the cohort looks very, very similar. You have an archetype that begins to emerge,
Architect, yeah.
down to the units of one. And on the marketing side, I'm a pretty strong believer that the right answer exists somewhere between 200 segments and one. There's probably not at least at this point, pure ROI for going to one. But I'll give you another example that I'm hearing a lot, right? So I've been fortunate to meet a lot of just really, really brilliant people over the last 20 years or so. And invariably, they decide they're going to make a career change or make a company change, or they decide they just want to do something different or do the same thing, but in a different setting. And so, the normal way was that you get your resume together and then you reach out to these companies and you tell them your story, and then you get your interview and you land a position. I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to in the last 6 months that one of the first things that they do is they take the job description as it's posted, their resume as it exists, and ChatGPT or Grok in the middle, and they tailor their resume for the job posting. And so it's kind of the same thing from a human resources perspective, where people are using AI to tailor their story specific to the need. And I mean, you could do it manually, but people are using AI for it now too.
So, JB, you mentioned something very interesting earlier. Are you imagining a world where there would be like micro AI that are tailored to specific needs of the organization? I bring this up because I'm seeing a challenge in the organization environment today. Because if you look at the LLMs, they are really good at doing certain things. Like they are really good at like text summarizations, good at coding, probably good at customer service. But then if you take organization constitute of so many other functions that do like very specific things where, LLMs can't do much, like can't really help. So is the answer to that, I think what you explained earlier is like building really these very specific targeted AI models for those functions.
Yeah, and again, that gets back to kind of the local optima that we were talking about earlier, right? Is that I do believe, and I hate this, but I think it's the case, is that some of the best use cases right now are very, very, very focused. They're very task oriented in a very particular area, because it takes a lot of work to get the pipeline right, to get the data right. And so, yeah, I think, and again, this is on the fly, so I reserve the right to, over the next year or so, evolve my opinion on this. It does seem like right now that the very, very targeted use cases in very specific parts of the workflow are what are being successful. I hear people talking about invoices into accounting systems. I hear cats walking by.
Is that a real cat or AI cat?
No, it's an AI cat. But yeah, they seem to be very point solutions in many cases, and maybe one day we wake up and there's AGI and you can point it at any problem, but the LLMs are not good at math right now. They're not. I really want them to be. But the token size and the context window, you get more than a few thousand rows of dimensional data, and they kind of start to choke. And so I'm kind of old enough to see in the journey where back in the day we would do nth record sampling of data sets in SAS or SPSS or something like that to come to a conclusion or on a predictive model or things. And then we entered the world of big data and elastic MapReduce and all of these types of things and IoT data. And we're not sampling anything. Just give it all. I'm going to take all the data in, and we're going to, run these new types of approaches because we have the compute now to do these things. Well, guess what? We've come all the way back around to where we're doing nth record sampling now to summarize data, to feed it into an LLM to get a natural language description for a non-technical, non-data science user to be able to ask questions of a data set. You can't give it the whole data set anymore. You have to summarize. And so we've come full circle on that journey right now. And so it's not the best use of LLMs, I don't think. So I don't think I've lost the train of thought here. There are point use cases that I think do make the most sense right now.
JP, do you want to touch upon the operational tasks that need to get? I know that invoice, the bank reconciliations, invoicing, but those have been they've been doing that since RPA days, right? So for the last 10, 15 years. But
Yeah.
how do we really bring more AI and more like the kind of agentic AI into that? So you really drive more on the operational side.
I don't have a perfect one size fits all answer here. And part of this, I think, kind of comes back to what do you want to become as a company? And I'm going to answer your question on a little bit of a journey. So we talked at one point in the conversation about what do you want to become as a company? Do you want to seek local optima? Do you want to evolve what you're doing and get better EBITDA results? Or are you looking for a revolution where you maybe want to shift your entire market basket of comparables? And the reason I kind of come back to that is it comes back to business strategy and strategy being the management of scarce resources, the competition to be unique. There's a lot of areas that you can apply AI to your business, and you get a couple of different reactions from staff in a company when you go in and you talk about AI. You either get the AI's coming for my jobs, I'm not going to tell these people anything because they're just going to replace me with an agent. To the other side of people are very, very excited about it, and they're interested and they're intrigued and they want to be involved. And the reason I kind of paint that spectrum is that within any business, you don't know, every two organizations have a little bit different DNA, every two departments have a little bit different DNA. And so it's not just the technology and the data, there's also this people component to it. And AI readiness includes the staff and their intellectual curiosity and whether they're willing to embrace it or not. And so I bring those things up in that context to kind of set the table to say, it really matters the business strategy and it really matters what assets you're starting with, because you have to put those ingredients together to bake the cake. And if your goal is to optimize EBITDA, then it's the classic like level of effort versus potential return 2x2 matrix. And I'm going to find those areas and I'm going to apply some agentic AI to those areas in the business. If it is more transformative or more category shifting, then maybe I have to think about it a little bit differently, and I have to think about the raw materials that I have and the staff's willingness to embrace and go do things. And the reality is you're going to have to tell some people, no, we're not doing your area right now, because when we put the list of 10 things together, we're starting with these 3 areas. Here's why. Maybe we'll get to you in the next year, maybe we won't. And so I think it's with everything. You really have to go through the trade-off decisions to say, for this enterprise, this is the best place for an agent to be applied because it best aligns with our business strategy and what we can become. And so I'm not trying to dodge your question by any means, but I really do think it depends. And it really does start all the way back with the CEO and the board. You have to start back there because, I mean, anybody can go wild and build a data lake and start doing a bunch of agents, and like you could potentially even get some return out of it. But if it isn't aligned with where you want to go as a company and what you need to do to satisfy investors and shareholders and the vision of where you're trying to take the company, like it's not just an IT project anymore. And I think that's a really important point in this, is that this is moving from the CTO and the CIO to a CEO and board discussion, because this is the kind of transformation we're talking about. It's like that light up there, right? This is a phase shift technology that is changing the way you operate. And so it starts at the top.
JP, I have a question around that. Let's say if I was an enterprise company, I am leading an enterprise company, and I want to embark on this journey, this phase shift journey to change the way my company works. Like, what are the enablers I need to be aware of, or the barriers that I need to be careful about? Could
Yep.
you shed some light there?
So I think the barriers and the enablers in some are the same in many cases, right? So
Mm.
data is either an enabler or it's a barrier. And so, because it comes down to, is it accessible? Is it organized? Is it consumable by AI? Your team is either a barrier or enabler, right? Are they resistant to it? Are they embracing of it?
Mm.
Do they see it as something that's going to take their jobs or something that's going to allow them to add more value and get the menial task off their plate so they can focus on higher value tasks? And so I think that those definitely come into mind for the enabler and the detractor sides of the conversation. Is sometimes they're the same thing, and that's why that kind of inventory up front makes sense.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah. So the enablers and blockers are often the same, and it's data, the organization of data, it's your team and your team's willingness. And capital is less important now than it used to be because you can get there faster and it doesn't cost as much. But the other things as the leader of an enterprise that I think you have to have your own mind shift towards is that this technology today is the dumbest that it will ever be, right? And that was true yesterday too, by the way, because it's smarter today than it was yesterday, and it'll be smarter tomorrow than it is today. And so you can't wait to get on this boat because your competitors are not. And so it is important to embark on the journey today. I think you do that though with caution because it is the dumbest today that it will ever be. And sometimes finding value with these use cases is really, really difficult. And sometimes it's just not ready. But by getting on this boat today, you begin to organize your data differently. Your staff begins to think differently, and those are really, really important things because ultimately it will be part of your journey. And the quicker you get on it, the quicker you start to evolve as an organization. And I see this with our customers, and I see this with my kids in their school, is that all of our customers have come out with an AI policy, in the last 2 years or so. And typically that AI policy says something like, don't do it, don't share, don't put information in the box, right? Because of all the IP concerns and PII and PHI and all those things are true and valid. And then I see the same thing with my kids in their school. Don't use this to write your paper. Don't use it to do this. And I think we have to, as a society, flip that and say, do this. Do this in the schools. Here's how you do it. Here's how we're going to think differently in the future because of this. You can't rely on this just as your sole source of creativity to write your paper. You still matter, but it is a force multiplier for you to do so much more and to think about things that you would have never considered. And the same is true for companies, is that you can't imagine all the ways today that this is going to change the way you run your business tomorrow. And the only way that you begin to get any sense of that is to get on the boat and to start the journey. And so I think, my background's regulated industries, right? So data privacy matters. The way you handle data matters. The way you can audit and trace and all those things matter, and they're important. But we have to strike the balance, because if we're so restrictive and we slap our employees on the hands all the time for trying, then guess what? They're not going to use it. And that's going to hold me back as an organization. It's going to hold our students back in the way that they learn. So somehow we have to find a new way to strike that balance. And the default position has to be to use it. And here's how to safely do it.
So I have final question maybe. So with AI, there's great promise. If you do it right over the next 10 years, you'll probably make few millions or $1 billion on the way. But to do this, you still need people, right? So my question is how do you get organized around the people to get the best out of AI technology? Because we have to, I believe we have to think a little differently from how we operate today to get there. So what does that ops model look like?
So my thinking has evolved a lot on this, right? So I did some videos and some articles on LinkedIn about how CEOs should think about talent. And I was kind of down this path of senior talent and junior talent. And because of the rapid commoditization of kind of some of the more initial tasks on the food chain, I kind of originally thought, well, our junior talent is probably in a bad spot. And so your senior talent, your cross-domain knowledge talent is becoming super, super valuable. People that can kind of think holistically across your enterprise, that can be the intersection point between business and technology. Those are really, really important people. And maybe you should be looking at 2-for-1 strategies where you're eliminating multiple junior positions to fund more senior talent in your enterprise or whatever the case is. And so that was kind of my initial set of thinking. And kind of funny story. So I did this post on LinkedIn about this, and there was this guy that was kind of commenting back and forth on my post. And I'd been planning this big loop to go meet with customers. I quit flying during COVID and bought a camper van. So I drive a lot of places now with a Starlink dish and kind of camp and mountain bike along the way between client meetings. And I'd been planning this big route. I had client meetings all up through the Midwest I was going to meet. I had some meetings in Canada, some meetings in New York. And so I had this big loop, and this big loop included this really remote section in northern Ontario. And there was this town called Sudbury that I'd been looking at on the map for months. And so I did this post about talent and how CEOs should think about talent. And there was this guy that was commenting on my post, and I happened to hop out to his LinkedIn profile, and I was like, Sudbury, Ontario. I think that's the spot I've been looking at on the map. Wow, that's in the middle of nowhere. Why is this guy in the middle of nowhere, far northern Ontario, up near the Quebec border, talking about AI? And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, you want to sit down and have a conversation about AI? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so we did. We sat down in far northern Ontario, out in front of the lake, and had a conversation about staffing and talent and AI. And he had some really interesting perspectives on this and shifted my thinking quite a bit, because he talked about some approaches that they had taken to staffing and AI. And kind of specific to your question, you mentioned the word organizing around this for AI. And that's something that he specifically talked about, is that they basically have an AI agent that they invite to their meetings that they effectively treat like a team member, right? Because it's the best note taker in the bunch. It's a thought partner, so they can bounce ideas off of it. And so they have embraced AI as a team member that can remember everything and then kind of just use as a blue sky, hey, what about this? And it has this larger worldview to kind of think of. So I thought that was a really interesting approach. Is make AI a member of your team. So that's one part of it. The other part where he really shifted my thinking is I was kind of stuck on this paradigm of junior and senior. And the part that he brought up that really, really shaped my thinking is that it really is more about a thinking style than it is about junior and senior. And it is, you want to really, I think, and from my conversation, this is kind of an evolution of that thinking, is that you want to over-index on people that have traits like intellectual curiosity. Somebody that gets fixated on something and they just won't quit pulling the thread until they get to an answer. And it's not so much about junior and senior talent, but it is about hey, that's interesting, that's cool, let's see where this rabbit hole goes. And they just keep pulling and they keep exploring, because we are moving into a world where, again, as knowledge and reasoning is commoditizing to zero at a very rapid rate, the notion of, hey, I want to crank on this, I want to pull the thread, I want to iterate, I want to learn more, is, I think, maybe more important than junior or senior. And I think you still need that cross-domain knowledge, and there's some value in that. But I think you can have senior people that are kind of stuck in their old way of doing things, and they may know a lot about your business, and they may know about multiple domains, but they get the wrong mindset for AI. It requires a lot of neuroplasticity. It requires a lot of just self-motivation and curiosity, and it's folks that get fixated on something, and they really, really dig and drive. And so I think there's two learnings there. Is that one is organize your teams with an AI partner in the middle, is one concept that I think is important. And the other concept is that survey your talent and think about your people from the spectrum of, like, how quickly do they embrace new ideas? Like, how hungry are they about, how passionate do they get about problem solving? And those are the kind of people that I really think that you want to make sure you're retaining and attracting to your enterprise, because we don't know what tomorrow looks like. But what we know is that people that love problem solving, are really, really open to new ideas, and will stay at something, are the kind of people that thrive very, very, very well in these rapidly evolving, ambiguous environments, which is where we're headed for sure.
I think that's a good point to wrap up this episode. JP, it was a pleasure having you. Really enjoyed listening to your thoughts. Hope we can do this again.
Yeah.
But until then, thanks everyone.